Welcome to week number 7 of BurnerCast. We got a great episode planned for you guys tonight. Welcoming my co-hosts, Brett Hosmer and McKenna Seacrest. How you guys doing tonight?
It's pretty good. How about you, Joey?
Doing well. What about you, McKenna?
I'm doing really good.
All right. Well, we got a great episode planned for you guys tonight. We're welcoming a person very, very well known to many in the ballooning community, especially to those in the Midwest. You know, his voice is unmistakable, and it's helped thousands better understand our wonderful sport each and every year. Please welcome to the show the voice of ballooning, Tom Maynard. How are you doing tonight, Tom?
I am doing great, Joey. I'm glad to see Brad and Michaela. We had a lot of fun trying this about a week ago, and it just kind of fell flat. But most of my friends know I'm old, and so technology is not always my best friend. In fact, I was going to film this in one area tonight, and I realized that we had a minimal connection. So I moved to another part of the house to make sure we had a good shot tonight.
Good.
We got you loud and clear tonight. So do you want to talk to us about how you got your start just in ballooning?
Sure. It actually goes back into the late 1970s, and I was the secretary of a Lions Club up outside of Rochester. We called it Avon Hills in those days. It's Rochester Hills now. And a local balloonist. Now, you have to remember, this is very early in ballooning. He approached us about helping him host an event. And so in turn, we did. And believe it or not, it was a 9-day deal. And so we set up, we had a beautiful launch field and spectator area, and we had a stage, and we had music, we had food. We had no announcer. And because I had a background in radio, that became my spot. And the problem was, of course, I was not a balloonist. I had no idea what I was dealing with. I actually did my first event working for manufacturers' brochures to explain to the crowd what a balloon was and how it was built. And so we did that then. We had a carnival going on, and the local balloonist brought a balloon over. It was an old Picard balloon, which they're no longer made. But we tethered it in the parking lot. And then the pilot asked me if I'd like to go fly. And I was hooked. I knew I had to do this. And so that was really kind of the very beginning. And it just has grown from there. All right.
Awesome.
So what's next? 40 years later.
And then after that, what made you decide to combine announcing with ballooning after the event with the Lions Club? So what made you?
Well, I wanted to fly. I wanted to be a pilot, and I wanted to fly a balloon. But I have a confession. I am a terrible competitor. I was a fun flyer. I love to go out and fly for fun and have a good time, but to go out and seriously compete, no, I wasn't that guy. But some people that I knew, Phil Glebe from Brighton, Michigan, invited me to come and announce at some of his events. And so we did a couple of small events for Phil, and then I got a phone call to come out to Howell, Michigan, to an event that was to become known as the Michigan Challenge. And I was the first announcer they ever had out there. And we kind of built on it from there. And as time went by, I was getting more and more events. And it was referral stuff. It was pilots who knew me, who were either hosting an event or being a part of an event. And they said, gosh, you need to get this guy from Michigan. Ultimately, I met and dated a lovely lady who had come out of the drag racing area. And she said to me one day, Tom, if you don't start charging, because I never charged, it was give me a hotel room or a campsite, like you're treat me like a pilot. And she said, no, you have to charge or they won't take you seriously. And so that started it out probably about 1988. And then 1989, I got my chance to do the U.S. Nationals. I should back up and say in 1985, I announced the Worlds in Battle Creek. And in 1983, I did the North American Championships, also in Battle Creek. So I had some experience working with large balloon fields. I always have laughed and said I had everything from a sound system that fit on top of a garbage truck to a system that stretched over a mile. And but I understood, coming from the radio business, what a sponsor meant, because they're the folks who pay the bill. I also knew that our audience, those folks on the other side of the fence, saw what we did as just magic. And so it was a chance to help them, perhaps, I guess, grab a piece of that magic and understand what we were doing, so that their enrichment would always be there. I think that pretty well sums it all up.
Well, that's something you've done so well, is balancing, the technical aspects of the sport, with, oh yeah, here comes so-and-so pilot from, whatever town coming into the target, along with, getting shout outs to the sponsors, getting shout outs to the crowd. It's something that you've balanced so well. And I think that's what sticks out to so many people at Midwestern events when they hear your voice.
Well, I appreciate that. And there's another great announcer in ballooning, Glenn Moyer, who, and I know Glenn, I can't say we're good friends, but we've encountered each other as over the years at various events. And we do the same kind of show. We do it a little differently. And that's good. That's good for the sport. It's good for the people. We've always had a lot of respect for each other in that difference. But that's part of ballooning, is a lot of respect and a lot of friendships. That's what our sport is.
So thinking back to your early years of announcing, so you started, of course, as a radio guy. So when you got into the ballooning side, how long do you think it really took you to grasp the full, hey, this is how this works, to kind of explain to the crowd, instead of just being almost one of the crowd that's trying to say, hey, I don't really know as much compared to what you guys know? How long did that take?
Honestly, probably a couple of years.
Yeah.
That's just the way it was. Again, when I began, you have to remember there were a limited number of balloon manufacturers. You had Raven Industries, which we ultimately knew as Aerostar, but they were Raven in those days. They were the developer of the modern Hunter balloon. You had Cameron. At that point, everything was coming out of England from Cameron. You had Barnes balloons, which we now know as Firefly. But Tracy Barnes still had the company in those days. And we had Picard, which was built by Don Picard up in Minnesota. And so those were your four manufacturers. Now we're easily double that or more. And that doesn't even include Europe. And there are a lot of very, very good manufacturers in Europe right now. And you don't have to look too far. I mean, you can go to Kubitschek and say, wow, look at what they're doing. And of course, Don Cameron is still in England, but there's a Cameron facility in Dexter, Michigan. And if you want to go down and see Andy Beard and the gang there, they're doing first class work. Aerostar's gone. Picard is gone. Tracy Barnes is gone. The company has existed under a couple of different names. Even the Picard became known as Galaxy at one time. There were a couple of other manufacturers who entered the field, but then they kind of disappeared. And there is one long timer who's been around forever, and that is Avion out of Spokane, Washington. But again, Avion is a very small operation. They're not looking to be the biggest. They're just happy to build balloons. So that really is kind of the thrust of the whole thing. I'm looking over your shoulder and I'm seeing some great prints, and I'm looking. It's a lot of fun because you see friends, balloons in those pictures, and it always brings a smile to our face.
Yeah, the one picture's from I guess no, that's Battle Creek. Yeah, and the other one is from Albuquerque. So a couple times I was there. But yeah, the biggest thing with ballooning, you almost have to know it as an announcer because it's so hard as an announcer. If you're at a baseball game or a basketball game, you got numbers and pretty easy to pick out guys, and everyone knows who's who. But with like balloons, you almost have to describe the balloon, and like you're almost painting a picture to the people that don't know anything. So I feel like it's a really challenging job most times.
It can be. I usually ask our events, and I'm going to get that eyebrow there. I ask our events if they will supply me with photos, because again, you have to kind of think back and realize you bought a balloon and you just flew it, and you flew it and flew it. You always knew who that was because that's Susie's balloon over there, and that's Ren's balloon over here. That's Ted's. But as the eras have changed, the equipment has improved. We are buying balloons at a more frequent rate. So nowadays, it's like, please send me as many photographs of the balloons coming into an event as you can so that I can digest that ahead of time. Now, that's good for 30 or 40 balloons. When you start looking at 200 balloons for a championship, quite honestly, I have volunteer staff who help, and they're spotting for me. So they really make me sound smart. And that's the only way I can put it.
Yeah, so we talk about big events, and one of the big events you actually were the announcer for a while was the Cool Pro Tour. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, actually, the Cool Pro had ended, but then a group called Balloon Tour America began. Rob and Jetta Shantz, who are out of Jacksonville Beach, Florida, began that. And a lot of pilots would know Rob Shantz through Shantz Insurance. In fact, I kind of smile. I was with Rob when he got word that he had passed his insurance exams and was going to be able to sell. But we started in with them, and it was kind of a fluke. They had lined up another announcer to be on the tour who suddenly called them sick, and he couldn't go. And so I got a phone call, and I met them in Washington, D.C., and we did a thing called the Joint Services Open House, which was the balloons on the field, but we also had an air show attached to it. And at the end of that weekend, they asked me if I would be interested in doing more events. And so that began a friendship, really, and that's the only way to describe it, that lasted for many years. And we traveled all over we were in Ridgecrest, California, Billings, Montana, Lake, I'm trying to think of the lake down in Virginia, just having a great time. Florida, having a great time. And that was Balloon Tour America. It finally waned as the insurance business grew. And the Pro Tour as we know it really doesn't exist anymore. I think it'd be fun to bring it back. But the question is, do you have enough pilots to really make it worthwhile? And it's certainly not something at my age that I'm going to take on. It is, that just doesn't work. But I'd be happy to come back as their announcer for any Pro Tour at any time.
That sounds like such a cool experience and something that doesn't really happen as often anymore. And do you have a favorite memory from any of those experiences?
I can look back and great memories. I think a lot of folks out in the balloon community know Paul Petrin. Paul is an accomplished pilot. He now lives up here in Howell, Michigan. I can remember Paul when he was flying commercial contract. He was employed by Phil Glebe at Renaissance Balloon, and we were in Billings, Montana. And in all honesty, it was a bit windy. And by saying a bit windy, that's being very kind. It was windy. But Phil and Paul really wanted to fly. And so I was with Rob and Jetta on the Pro Tour, on Balloon Tour America. And so Rob finally said to him, okay. They said, we want to fly into the field. Well, they did. They launched maybe a half a mile away. And they flew in over the crowd. And the crowd just erupted. They were so happy to see him. And they came into that field, and it was a high wind landing. There was no two ways around it. That's what it was. We always tell people, we'd love to tell you that everyone is a nice little stand up in the grass. Wasn't that fun? But the truth is that sometimes they're a bump bump, and sometimes they're a bump bump drag, and sometimes they're a drag drag drag. And that's what they got that day. That they were just dragging. When the balloons finally stopped, they crawled out of the basket and they giggled like little boys. The joy of being in the air, the joy of landing, and they just really, it was wonderful for me to see. And I can look back and I can think of a time at the U.S. Nationals in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We had very, very light and variable wind conditions one morning. And standing on a 3-story steel tower, I'm looking out on the target field. They set a target up right, literally 100 yards from where I was. And I'm seeing balloons come in. And if you drop down to a low altitude, the balloons just creeped ever such a little bit. And suddenly we got to laughing because over the target was a fellow from Longview, Texas by the name of Dr. Bill Bussey. A wonderful, wonderful man. We've had so many good times together. And who comes in above him at a little bit higher speed until he drops down and he gets caught in that, it's almost becalmed. And his brother, Bruce, who is also from Longview. But Bruce can't see the target because Bill's over the target in his balloon. Bruce wants to throw. He can't because his brother is in the way. And we could literally hear the conversation between the two of them about, get out of my way. I want to throw. I'm not going to move because he knew I've got him. I'll score better than him if I just stay in his way the entire time. And we just laughed and laughed and laughed. Two brothers playing a game. And those are a couple of great memories. And there's so many more. They're hard to even say. But memories all. And I've had a life full of them.
So, between your work with, the Balloon America Tour, you're still announcing at events, like Howell, Angola, Findlay, Kalamazoo. How does one book you for an event like that? Like, what's the process like?
The normal would be to have a pilot. Maybe he's assisting in putting the event on. Maybe he's the competition director. Maybe he's on the committee, and he makes a call and says, "Tom, we'd like to have you in as our announcer." I just today finalized a good friend from Indiana, Jack Semler from Indy Hot Air, contacted me and said, "Hey, there's a wonderful event here in Indiana, and I'd like to see you be part of it." And then he backed out and allowed me to, we say, negotiate with the local committee, and which we did. And we finally got all the T's crossed and the I's dotted. We've always worked hard to make this affordable. That's I'm retired. I don't do this for a living. This is fun money. In fact, we always laugh and say, usually any money I make at an event, my wife and I spend in town, in between restaurants, and we collect art and antiques So we're always out rooting around looking for stuff. So it's one of those things where we can say, the money that we made stays, and we keep it very, very affordable for anybody. And that's really how it works. Word of mouth. Word of mouth is still the best advertising I have. Maybe it'll be the BurnerCast. Somebody's going to catch the BurnerCast and say, "Hey, Tom, how do I find you?" Well, you'll find me on Facebook. Yeah, it's under my name, Thomas Maynard. Maybe you want to send me an email. Well, it's thomasmaynard@hotmail.com. You'll find me. And I promise you, if we can work it out, if there's a hole in our schedule, we're going to come and we're going to have a good time.
Like Tom's saying, I know I personally couldn't advocate for anyone better for the job. If any event directors, if you need an announcer, you know where to find him now. So definitely contact Tom.
So does
I got the plug in, didn't I?
So does that mean Preston's going to hit you up now for the Preston Classic? Are we going to have like an official Preston Classic event with Tom Maynard as the announcer? Is that how it's going to go now?
I would certainly hope so. Yeah, it would be a great idea. I'm listening to Michaela giggle in the background. Michaela, any influence you have out on the West Coast, we love it out there. We'd love to come west and do some more stuff. So
it would be a blast if you came out there.
We'd have a great time. I'm very fortunate. I have 3 children. Actually, I'm on my second marriage, which is okay because that just means that the first one was really smart. But I have 3 children and 2 stepchildren. And I had to smile one day. My oldest daughter said to me, "Dad, we don't remember life without balloons." And she came to an event one day just to see one of the crew for a pilot who was there, because she had memories as a kid of being with him and the fun they all had. And I look back now and realize there are pilots that my kids grew up with. And how wonderful is that they can look back now and say, "Oh yeah, I knew Dawn long before she was ever married to Bill," or I knew Sean Rea. And we used to play together as kids on launch fields. And here we are now as adults with families, jobs and responsibilities. But at the same time, we're still playing and having fun on launch fields. So it's a great idea. It's a wonderful time.
So does that mean you still remember young Joey with the blue lips coming up to you back in Howell back in the day?
Yeah, I do remember young Joey. Fortunately, back in those days, we didn't have trading cards, because I have to smile. There is the Howell event every year produces these trading cards now. This is several years in a row. And they give them out to the pilots, and they have everybody on a rope line so people can come by and get them. And then they always give me a handful. And I just kind of laugh, because nobody really wants the announcer's trading card. And it made me think back to 1989, when I got the very first nationals that I did. It was down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and they had contacted me, and we had a real easy time of putting together the agreement, no problems. And then I get this very nice letter in the mail one day asking me for a half-toned photograph of myself and my bio so they could publish it in the program. And I had 2 bios at that time. One was very serious, very straightforward, and one was done very tongue-in-cheek. I was born at a young age, that kind of thing. And for a photograph, I provided them with a brown paper lunch sack with a green crayon stick figure drawn in it. And I said, "It doesn't matter what I look like. It only matters what I sound like." And they actually published that. as the pitcher. And I appreciated that, because really it isn't important what I look like. I always welcome the opportunity to talk to any of our visitors along the line, but it's really more important what I sound like. And can I convey confidence in not only our pilots, but in our sponsors? We need those corporate sponsorships. That's what makes events happen. That's what provides a living for many pilots, are good corporate sponsors. And we want to make sure that we're taking care of both sides of the line, both sides of the fence, spectators and sponsors alike. And of course, our pilots, because they're friends. I cannot think of a single pilot that over the years we haven't made friends with. And it's not that you talk each day or each week. We may not see each other for a year. It's as we never left. That friendship is that good. And so that's what we do. We work hard to have that happen.
So, of the events that you announce, which one is your favorite to announce?
Oh, well, you know what? That would be like asking me the most beautiful balloon I ever saw. And I have a confession to make. The balloons are much like old girlfriends. Yes, some were better looking than others, but none of them were ever ugly. And that's kind of an event. I would say that I probably had more fun down in Louisiana, whether it was the Nationals, whether it was at the Southeast Regionals, whether it was over in Lafayette with Balloon Tour America. I think it's the people and the wonderful folks in South Louisiana that make it fun. And I have to say, I really just thoroughly enjoyed it. But at the same time, I can look at other events. I can think of Middletown, Ohio, and the great pride I had in ballooning. And in Balloonist, we met a young man. I had stopped at a convenience store, and he had cerebral palsy. And that is such a crippler sometimes. But he was so excited to see the balloons were in town, and he saw my credentials. And he talked to me. He was so wound up about the balloons. You know, Tom's always got a pass hanging around. So I went out to the car and I got a pass, and I said, "This pass will get you in." Well, he lived up in a little apartment above the commercial district with his grandmother. They had nothing. And I mean nothing. But he was so excited, and he showed up the next evening, and there was no way he was going to climb the steps up the scaffolding to go up and stand with me. But I said, "You have a job. You're going to stand here at the bottom of the steps, and you're going to make sure the people coming up there belong up there." That May, I got him credentials so he could come every night. Well, the next thing you know, it was one of the last nights we had a big balloon glow. And the gang from, and I'm not ashamed to mention them commercially, Remax down in that area. I come down off of the scaffold, and what did I find? Ricky, this young boy, in the basket with the Remax team, with his Remax shirt on and his Remax hat, and he's got a balloon and glow, and he is the proudest guy on that launch field. And I was so proud that night of my ballooning friends and what the dream that they gave to a young man. It's just the way we are. Balloonists are of that nature. We're givers. We want to share the magic of ballooning. It's not a secret. It's not something that people will never understand. Given enough information, they can learn. And some of them will come forward someday to become pilots, just like you guys. And that's a great thing.
I definitely agree with that. I think it's so important to share the joy of ballooning with people. Like, it makes me so happy. And I love that you shared that story.
Thank
Do you
you.
have any other favorite memories from an event that you've announced?
Oh, good heavens. It would almost be hard. I can think of being in California and watching special shapes inflate and watching the eyes. It is, oh, for me, it's about that audience, that crowd, because I understand that what we are doing is magical. To them, this is just the most amazing thing to see. And yet, when they're standing on that side, as I say, on the other side of the fence, and they're watching us, how exciting it is for them. I would say that going out to places like Albuquerque, and in all honesty, I have never been a pilot in command at Albuquerque, and I don't know that I'd even be interested in doing that. I'd love to fly at Albuquerque, but I'm usually on vacation when I'm out there, and I don't go hunting anybody up. But I happen to walk by a special shaped balloon, and I recognized who the pilot was, and listening to the audience, that's a girl flying that balloon. Well, it was. It was Glo Keo, who's one of the best special shape pilots I can imagine. Her and Jack Semler are like the two. If you have a special shape balloon, go find one of them. That's who you want. But to listen to people suddenly discover that a girl was doing this. Yeah, gals, you do it well. You're meeting McKenna right here. If you've never watched BurnerCast before, this is the kind of person who flies balloons. It's not just the guys, it's the gals too. And they do it damn well.
Yes, we do.
So on the other end of that spectrum, what's the most interesting story you have from announcing? You know, in other sports, we get stories about like, you know, streakers going on the field. We don't get that balloon event. So what's something unexpected that's happened at a balloon event?
I was doing a nationals actually in Ohio, and we got up in the morning and everything was great and clear and beautiful and looking wonderful. And at the way that was structured, I did not go to the pilot briefing. I went straight to the announcer's stand, and they handled the briefing was held by people far better and more responsible than me. And the problem became once the balloons took to the air, as we all understand, you're not allowed to land if you want to have a good score. You know, you may have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 targets. You can't land in between. You got to keep flying. And we were just off of a river, and the fog hit suddenly. And I mean, it was pea soup. This could be a real problem. You know, we're worried about power lines, but I could stand and listen, and I could hear the balloons, and I could hear the burners. So I just kept talking. And I had several pilots come to me later and they said, I was so glad you were still announcing because it talked us into the field. Because it was not something anybody was prepared for. And once they arrived where we were, they landed because they had a large open area with no power lines and no concerns, and it was very safe. And we never had a problem. But it was like, oh my, I'm standing on the 3-story tower and I'm watching this, and I'm amazed. I'm amazed at the skill that we're seeing. I've seen, I don't want to say tragic events. I happened to witness one evening at a Glow, a pilot who flying a particular style of system where he would place his burners into, I refer to it as a shoe or horseshoe arrangement, put a safety pin through it. And he had actually inflated the balloon, but never put the safety pins in. And in the process of putting some heat in the balloon, that burner came loose. And this could be just a horrific situation. We were grateful that he wasn't injured any worse than he did have some minor burns, but we were able to get an emergency crew there but about 30 minutes later. But lo and behold, one of the pilots right almost adjacent to him was an EMT from Florida. And I'm proud to say my wife worked in a large metropolitan hospital here in Michigan. And they took off and went to work with towels soaked in coolers of water to cool the burns and take care of him till he could be taken into a hospital, treated, and he was back the next day. But it's one of those things that kind of makes you hold your breath. And as an announcer, I'm the ringmaster. My job is to keep you, the public, focused on something else while everybody else is doing the work they have to do. And so again, it was one of those things that I was grateful to have some people around us who knew what to do. It was a tragic accident, and that's really what it was, an accident. It wasn't planned. It wasn't a failure on anything. The equipment didn't fail. It performed exactly as it should. It was an accident. And it's sometimes important for people to understand when you see the big news story about a balloon accident and they make this such a big, sometimes it's really not some terrible, sometimes it is just that. It's an accident. It's a wind shear. It's a pilot maybe who made the decision to fly because he felt a little pressure. But let's not make it more than it is. That's important. People need to understand it's a very safe sport. Properly done, you're going to have the greatest time ever. And that's real important. I've had, like I said, so many experiences, even my own, to inflating an old Picard balloon, having a lady come over and say to me, "Do you have a little girl with braids?" It was my daughter Shannon, who was 3 years old. And I said, "Yes." And she said, "She's under the truck." She got out of the way of the burner. And so I inflated for a long time with that child hanging around my neck on my back. Because if you're behind me, the flame can't get you. And you're safe. So there are so many memories and so many good fun memories. Some of them are just laughable. You just look at them now and you just sit back and laugh. I'm so grateful to have come up from this sport from early days to where we are now.
I love that. And I feel like people like you really inspire me to want to go on adventures and just have all those cool experiences like you did. I think that's really awesome that you were able to travel and do all of those things.
Yeah, it has been fun. And I think that's really the big score here for me. When announcing isn't fun anymore, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
I will say this, I'm getting older. I'll be 72 this year. And sometimes you have to learn when to step back. But I happen to be very, very fortunate. I have a son, Doug, who always laugh. His sisters say, "Oh my God, you're like Dad. You have the same skill level," because we've always had jobs as Dad. But he's also a stand-up comic. And I have actually taken him out with me to events and had him work with me announcing them. So that when the time comes to step back, he can step in. And I think that's he grew up in ballooning. And there are pilots out there he's known his entire life. He's 43 years old. And he's known these people all of his life. And so I figure he's a great guy to be in that spot. So when the time comes, I'll step back and let Doug take the reins. And I won't ride off in the sunset, I'll just be on the other side of the fence with all the rest of the folks loving the show.
Just cheering them on.
That's right. Just having a great time. Having a great time. I
Great.
have. This has been a wonderful, wonderful place for me. Some of the friendships, and I know our buddy Steve down there in Jackson. I have had a lot of fun teasing him over the years to come out and spend some time with me at my summer place. We'd love to have him come out, and we can go down and play a little tennis, and have some fun. And he just giggles and laughs every time I offer that up to him. And one of these days, I hope he'll come, and we'll have a great time because he's a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. So what is on your ballooning bucket list?
Well, bucket list wise, it kind of every year it changes a little. I'm always excited for the newest event to come along. We're a little concerned. Last year we all lost pretty much everything. There were no events. The COVID just kind of took it all away from us. But I have confirmations on 3 this year. I'm waiting for some more confirmations, but some other places, including adding a new one here in Indiana, a little town called Fisher outside of Indianapolis, will be at the Connor Prairie Museum, doing a show on Thursday night and Friday morning. But I always look forward to a new one. I do have, so to speak, a bucket list of I would love to be invited to come out to Arizona and go up to Lake Havasu and do that beautiful event there. And Colorado really has a couple of great events. And those would also be nice to add to my list. The rule of thumb in my house, though, is our friend Glenn Moyer, who works as an announcer. If it's a Glenn Moyer event, I don't even talk to these people. That's Glenn's. Leave it alone. That's called business ethics in my book. So if Glenn isn't doing any of those, I'd love to do them. That's how I would put that together. But I'd love to go to Lake Havasu. I think that looks like such a fun event. Everything I've ever heard is it's a great place to fly, and a lot of wonderful, wonderful people. So, and of course they're stuck. It's not just me. You get Cindy in the deal too, and she's been around a long time with me in ballooning. And our 20th wedding anniversary is coming up, and then we lived together for 10 years before that. So she's been around for a lot of it, and she's always along with me on those trips and making memories for a lot of our spectators. I won't tell you how, but a lot of them get an up close personal view they'd have never gotten without Cindy being there. So it's always fun to have her along with me too.
The last thing we're going to talk about tonight is we've got some fan questions in. We've got some from, us that we ask each guest. Then we've got some from fans. So we're just going to kind of rapid fire these at you.
Okay.
All right. So our first one is, do you have a favorite Marvel movie?
You know what? I would have to be an Iron Man guy. I just love Iron Man. I love the whole concept of the flight and overcoming the difficulties at the beginning to keep his life going. And he's a bit of a irascible character, maybe is a good way to put it. But at the same time, he cares. And I think that's great too. So I love Iron Man. I always have been.
Do you have a go-to pre-flight meal for before you announce?
No, actually, no, I don't. Cindy would tell you I pace a lot. It isn't so much about food. Although I will confess that if we're doing a flight and a glow, that sometime between the two of those, I need food. But I'm pretty open to the Italian sausage with the peppers and the onions, the pizza, the fried chicken. I always tell people I got the shape I'm in by eating carny food, but it's paid, and I love it. So there's no specific food, but I will say I do enjoy some good carny food.
You can't go wrong with carny food, especially at a balloon event. I mean, that's
No, you
the only
can't.
way to do it. So, much like athletes, if you were to have like, a theme song or a walk-up song that comes on before you start announcing, what do you think it would be?
Well, it's funny. I know you've seen me a long time, Joey, out in the hall, and you know that when it's time to go fly, if we're going to go fly, I do have a piece of work, piece of music that people would recognize. You can't touch this, and we always interrupt it with the ring bell and advising people that it's time to rumble. Let's get ready to rumble. But in terms of saying a theme song, I'm a classic rock guy. I'm an old timer, and so I would have to say, for me, it's probably Stray Cats. I do love some good Stray Cats, and that Stray Cat strut would probably be the thing I'd have to walk up on stage to.
If you could have lunch with one ballooning legend, past or present, who would that be?
I think if I was going to have lunch with one, it's one of the earliest balloonists who I've never met, and that is Don Cameron from Cameron Balloon in England. I've met and spent time with Per Lindstrand, Ed Yost, and Don Picard sat with me during a nationals, and a worlds. So these were times. These were men I did become acquainted with, but I've never had a chance to sit with Don Cameron. So I would say Don Cameron would be the guy I'd want to sit with.
Is there ever a time that you recall when a pilot switched balloons on you last minute and it tripped you up while announcing?
Oh, you bet they did. And boy, way more than once. It usually happens at least once a year. And we have a young pilot from Zeeland, Michigan, Jeff over there. And great pilot. Oh, gosh, he's a great pilot. But he will periodically change balloons on me. And Andy Baird is the other one. Because, of course, Andy is Cameron US. And so if he has an opportunity to fly the latest and the best from them, he's in it and showing it off to the other pilots and to the public. That's always a good one. And so yeah, it's pretty much a standard every year. You got to figure there's going to be at least one or two guys that have a new balloon, but they didn't provide the picture of the new balloon. So you're looking for the old balloon and it's not there. And that's the announcers. I often call them the unknown pilot, so that it fosters them to bring me a picture before the weekend's over.
So when that happens, do you try and guess, or do you just wing it and be like, oh, that might be somebody, or there might be somebody else?
It's more a wing it. You really do. You'd like to guess, and sometimes when you're winging it, you are guessing. But it's more just kind of a wing it, and you talk about what you're saying, and you always have to imagine also that in most cases, you've got if you're on a launch from the field, you've got more than one balloon going off, and so nobody's going to notice. It's on the fly-ins that it can be hard, and so suddenly you have the unknown pilot. The unknown balloon. He's not on your color sheet. He's probably on your list, but you're winging it as best you can until somebody gets a look at a competition number on the side of the basket, or somebody walks up and goes, "Hey, Maynard, that's Joe Jones," and that's Joe's new balloon. And so then I'm saved. And that's how that works. I'm saved. But yeah, you can't know everybody. Not nowadays. In the original early days, it was easy. Nowadays, with thousands of balloons, not so much.
And to piggyback off that, it makes it even harder when you've got, people like the Hartsills with multiple balloons that look so similar and they're all flying. Or if you've got multiple of a corporate entry, such as like 2 Remax balloons.
Yes, I always kind of smile. One of the things that we'll tell our audience, they actually had an event in Colorado at one time. They brought all of the Remax balloons from across the nation together for a weekend event. And I'm not sure who would have had it harder. Me as an announcer, I wasn't there, so I can't tell you for sure. Or how would you like to be the crew chief and the crew members sitting on the side of the road looking, which one is your balloon? The red, white, and blue one. And that would have to be a challenge, but it's part of the fun. And that really is what it is. It's all about the fun.
So our next question comes from fellow pilot. You've already mentioned him. His name's Steve Sitko. So Steve asks, what do you drink to keep your throat from drying out on those hot summer nights announcing at events?
Well, as Steve well knows, I usually have a cup of coffee hanging around. Okay, no sugar, no cream, just plain coffee. Sugar kind of grabs the vocal cords, and you don't do that. But my beverage of relaxation choice, I'm a Scotch and soda guy, and I enjoy my Scotch and soda. And Steve has often laughed about my Scotch because I usually will have a little gathering of pilots after a flight. Everybody gets together, and maybe you're eating pizza. This guy stopped for pizza. This one got fried chicken. This one stopped at Dairy Queen. But you're sitting in a room together. And usually the first thing Steve will ask me is that Scotch? Yeah, that's my Scotch, Steve. Everything's over with for the night. I can relax and have a cocktail. So, yep, coffee during the event, but a definite Scotch and soda when it's done.
We got one more for you. If you could bring back any event that no longer is taking place, which one would it be?
Oh, that's a fun one. An event that no longer exists. You get so involved with the ones that do. I think for me, and I think they're actually still doing something, was Middletown, Ohio, down at the southern end, down near Cincinnati. And they are still doing, I think, a small event today. But I would love to go back to Middletown, and I'd love to see a big event because the community was so warm and so welcoming. And again, there are some wonderful memories. Some of you don't even remember there was a handicap balloon at one time called Serena's Song, and being down there with their crew when they were setting up and flying, kids in wheelchairs, kids with walkers, and seeing the absolute thrill. I'd love to go back to Middletown and see a big one, a big event, because I think that's what it deserves.
Well, that's all we've got for you this time on BurnerCast. We'd like to thank Tom Maynard for joining us tonight. You were a great guest. We got a great episode. Really glad you got to come on. Next week, we're welcoming young gun pilot Blake Aldridge to the show. And we'll see you next time.